Delighted to say Eamon Dunphy is with us to give us his thoughts on last night. Eamon, what was your emotion as the penalty shootout unfolded?
Well, I was cheering for Italy, so I wanted them to win the penalty shootout. I also thought bringing Marcus Rashford and Jadon Sancho on with a couple of minutes to go in extra time and expecting them to take a penalty, not having been in the game at all, and in fact hardly having been in the tournament, I thought that was a big mistake. I also thought Saka was put into a terrible situation. He's 19, hasn't played many games for England, and he was left out of the team last night at the start. So my emotion, it was emotionally draining, really. I wanted Italy to win. I thought they were by far the better team on the night. In fact, through the tournament, but certainly on the night, they were the better team, despite getting off to the worst possible start. So, you know, the right team won, and it was very, very dramatic.
It was super dramatic. That's the thing. Why did England start so well and then fade so, from their perspective, catastrophically as the match unfolded? What happened to them?
Well, I think the occasion got to them. First of all, to score after 2 minutes is brilliant. And it was a great goal. Luke Shaw took a half volley. It's the hardest skill in football. It was a superb goal. But that's it. They never played with any intent and purpose, and crucially with any tempo from that point on. Italy had to drag themselves back into the game. It took them about 15, 20 minutes to do that. But in that period of time, England were dropping deeper and deeper. And if you remember, say, 25 minutes into the first half, Harry Kane was behind the ball. They had their whole team behind the ball. So for Italy, the threat, the attacking threat of England had gone. And I thought if you watched Harry Kane lumbering around the field, not looking fast, not looking fit, not looking fresh, I think the occasion got to England. I think there was far too much talk from Gareth Southgate in particular about healing the nation and talking about divisions in the nation. All of that stuff heaps pressure on players. They should have just kept their head down and got on with the football business. But as I'm sure everyone could see, in England, the Queen sent them a letter. Southgate made a statement, another statement to the nation. All of that stuff weighs heavily on very young men. And the three players who missed the penalty are very young men. And really, they should have stayed in their bubble and taken as much pressure off themselves as possible. They didn't do that. And I think that's one of the lessons Southgate could learn. He also left Saka out of the team and brought in Trippier, a fullback. Now that was there was intent in that. That meant he was taking off an attacking player, putting on a defensive player. Why?
That intent is really interesting to tease out, because it seems to be almost at the core of what Southgate does, that there is a conservatism, even when they're 1-0 up, there's an opportunity to go, because we know the Italians haven't really come from a 2-0 lead down in that entire time under Mancini. I think maybe once they've been 2-0 down in that whole time. They haven't experienced it. They certainly haven't looked like scoring twice in many of the games that they played against the good teams, right? So go and kill the game. Go and try and win it, as opposed to just don't lose it.
Well, every team from amateur level to schoolboy level to professional level, if you get 1-0 up in a big game, the first thing that crosses your mind and the first thing you'd say to each other, let's get the second and let's kill this off. Now, that intent was never evident in that England side. They dropped deeper and deeper, and they didn't know where to go. They didn't have a playmaker. Trippier is not a playmaker. What he did, he was an extra defensive midfield player, really there to stop Insigne or to double up with Kyle Walker and close down the threat from Insigne, who, if you remember, came inside and scored a great goal against Belgium. That was a threat that Southgate was obviously conscious of. But that's not the way you win a major championship. You have to show some courage. You have to show, you have to get your opponents on the back foot. And you can't get your opponents on the back foot when you've got 7 defensive-minded players on the pitch and only 3 attack-minded players. Harry Kane, Raheem Sterling, and then he was hoping that the fullbacks would get forward. Shaw's a very good player. He scored a great goal. But you have to have, courage, especially in what was effectively a home game before their own fans. So he made mistakes. And I think all through the tournament, if you look at the games, they had a lot of easy games. They had Ukraine in Rome in the only away day to Rome. Ukraine were really tired team and they beat them easily. Who have they beaten? Czech Republic. They really, really struggled against Denmark. But at that point, the narrative, the story was rolling. Football's coming home, 55 years of pain. They were building up a crescendo of emotion. Now, emotion takes its toll on players, and it takes its toll on their legs. I think there was a young British girl playing at Wimbledon the other day, and she had to stop her match because she was emotionally drained. She couldn't breathe, she said. That happens to footballers as well. I've been there. I played in international matches, in big matches, where my legs went. One of the effects of, being extremely nervous is that your legs won't, they go. The energy goes out. I could see that in the England team last night.
It sounds as well, Eamon, as if you think that Gareth Southgate didn't necessarily help that situation, that he almost fanned those flames a little bit.
I'm afraid he did. He held a press conference on Saturday night at 7:15 or 7:15, whatever it was. He went out with Harry Kane. It's a very strange time. You're obliged to give a press conference the day before a match. You should do it at lunchtime. Then it's over with. Then you go back to the hotel and you seal it all off. He was making mission statements for the last few days, really, the days building up. And he was adding to the build-up. He was sucking in, the wider community rather than the football community. He was actually adding to the pressure. And I just think it showed a misunderstanding of what football is really about. You need to be in your bubble. You don't need to be worrying about whether he's going to get a knighthood or not, or all of that stuff. You need to be closed off, sealed off from that. And you could tell. I mean, if you look at, I haven't seen the possession stats for the 90 minutes, but I say Italy are well ahead. They were certainly 60-40 ahead at half-time. And you have to look at your opponents. This team is now 34 games unbeaten. The reason is they have experienced players, Chiellini, of course, Bonucci at the back, but also Jorginho in midfield. Insigne is another very experienced player. They're very, very good players, and they haul themselves back into the game. They pass the ball, ask questions of England all the way through. And, Pickford had a few anxious moments and made a couple of good saves. But the goal, when it came, it seemed almost inevitable, the Italian goal.
It certainly did. You mentioned there as well that you talk about the quality that England have faced at this tournament. Did you see this as this golden opportunity for this group to actually get that trophy last night, and that it may not be so straightforward to get back to this level in 18 months' time?
Well, I think he's going to have to rebuild his team, you see. This was a team built not to lose and to beat bad teams 1-0, which is basically what they did. In fact, they couldn't beat Scotland. They drew 0-0 at Wembley. This team is designed to play against bad teams or mediocre teams. They don't have sufficient number of attackers in the side. I mean, you've got Grealish, you've got Sancho. Now, Sancho is really top-class player. He's 21. He's gone to Manchester United. He's got to rebuild the team. He's got to have a team that can hurt good teams with good attacking players. Grealish might be an answer. Sancho certainly will be an answer. Saka looked very promising in the tournament and was very effective. Why did he leave him out last night and put a full-back in? That's the question. And I watched the analysis last night on the British television stations as well as RTE. RTE's analysis was good with Liam and John there and Damien. But, I mean, Alan Shearer, Rio Ferdinand, and even Frank Lampard weren't able to say it. Gareth made mistakes. What they said is, we've got to praise Gareth. He's done a fabulous job. Well, he didn't do a fabulous job. He's got to be questioned, interrogated, asked why he made the decisions he made. And the worst decision of the lot was the penalty decision. To put that weight on 3 young guys, who 2 of whom hadn't played at all in this game, except for a couple of minutes. I think that was against a really good goalkeeper who was a big factor in that penalty shootout. I think that was asking too much, and it was a big mistake.
Why does a professional footballer need to be on the pitch for so long before taking a penalty? Because well, you need to be dialed in. You need to be in tune with the game. You know, you need to have. You can't go cold into a situation where the adrenaline has been pumping the goalkeeper has been pumping adrenaline for 2 hours. You've come off the touchline a couple of minutes before the penalty shootout. I mean, they weren't even on an extra time. They were put on specifically to take penalties. And you're not warmed up. Your head isn't right. You've had too much time to think. And you're not wired into the game, basically.
Is the problem with Southgate, though, that the attitude is, the default position is to be conservative, to have the 7 defenders on, and ultimately, whether or not the decision on the penalties, if it works out for him, he looks like a genius. But even if that did happen, even if they'd won this, that in the long run, this team might not fulfil its potential if you look at the talent, particularly the attacking talent they have, because they're not really given license to express themselves, or they're not asked to be brave.
No, they're not asked to be brave. I mean, being brave starts with the coach, and Southgate is the coach. You'd have to say that, you see, if you look at England's position, because they're high seeds, they always get easy qualifying groups. And therefore they cruise through to the knockout stages. They always qualify for tournaments. And the other thing you'd have to factor in on this occasion is 6 of the 7 games were at Wembley. And that's huge. And last night at Wembley with a home crowd of over 60,000, that's a big advantage. But there's nothing, you can't play the game with 7 defensive-minded players on the pitch and only 3 attackers. And Harry Kane last night looked deeply frustrated. He'd no support. He got no service. And he was isolated until instead of the team moving up behind him as a unit, he actually was dragged back into a defensive role behind the ball. That's not what Harry Kane does. He scores goals, he threatens defenders, and last night he would have had a great opportunity with support and service to threaten Chiellini and Bonucci, but he never got there.
Is there a possibility that a manager can change and have a road to Damascus style conversion after an incident like this, or does he just blame it on bad luck? If the penalty takers are taking the penalties, and so therefore kind of be doomed in Qatar to repeat the same mistakes again?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because he has decisions to make now, and you're right about these young players. They have to play, and they have to play in meaningful games. They have to play in tough games. If he decides to rebuild the team, then we'll see. But his mindset on the biggest night of his career so far as a coach was to take off Saka, not to start Saka, who's an attacking player and who's done well in the tournament, to take him off and to put a fullback, Kieran Trippier, on instead. That tells you an awful lot about his attitude. They weren't going to put Italy under pressure. They weren't going to be primarily attacking in a home game. They were just going to sit there and hope that Harry Kane or Sterling would get the goal. And when Luke Shaw got the goal after 2.5 minutes, I mean, in theory, that was the dream. But that means you have 85 minutes to hang on, if that's what you're going to do. And that's really what England tried to do.
Yeah, yeah. And you've been brilliant with your time. Thanks a million. We did save you from having to wear an England jersey, though. England losing last night, so it's an emotional outcome.
Okay, thank you very much.
Good stuff. That's Eamon Dunphy giving us some thoughts there this morning, and loads of your thoughts pouring in on YouTube. We'll get to them in just a couple of minutes' time as well. YouTube.com/offtheball. Best place to get us these days, of course, is on the OTB Sports app, OTB AM, brought to you by Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette. Put your best face forward with their new and improved razors.